You know the Adam Sandler of the zany comedies, the infinite memes, the movies that everyone watches but critics seem to loathe. But have you ever imagined what happens when the lights go out and he is left alone with his own doubts? On a freezing night in New York City, after yet another premiere where the audience was laughing until their sides hurt, while critics whispered that it was just more of the same, a yellow cab pulled up in front of the theater and the guy who climbed into the back seat was a man in a beat-up hoodie, worn-out sneakers, eyes red from sleepless nights, with a producer badge still hanging around his neck like a reminder of a career that the world loves to hate. He threw himself onto the upholstery, let out a sigh that seemed to carry years of rejection, and murmured something that changed everything, saying, "Sometimes I wonder if laughing at me is the only way people have of taking me seriously." What you are about to discover in this conversation that happened between Manhattan stoplights and the silence of the car is not Hollywood gossip. It is not a millionaire ego crisis. It is a raw map of how the guy everyone calls a clown learned to transform public humiliation into internal strength, poisonous criticism into creative fuel, and existential doubt into a rebellion that yielded not only billions, but genuine respect where he least expected it. Stay until the end, because this journey is not just about Adam Sandler. It is about you, about all of us who have felt the weight of being labeled, underestimated, and put in a little box that does not explain even half of what we are capable of. And the insight he discovered on that ride might be exactly what is missing for you to stop asking for validation and start building things your own way. That freezing night in New York, I was parked in front of a fancy theater, the kind with a red carpet and people snapping photos non-stop. The revolving door kept spitting out groups of people laughing loudly, dressed like they were heading to the Oscars. When the back door of my taxi opened, I recognized the face immediately. It was Adam Sandler, but it was not the Adam from the screwball comedies you see on the screen. It was a guy in a beat-up hoodie, worn-out sneakers, with a producer lanyard still hanging around his neck like someone who forgot to take it off. The smile was there, but it was one of those automatic, tired smiles, the kind we use when we need to seem okay, but on the inside, we are exhausted. He got in slowly, closed the door, and the second the street noise was muffled by the glass, his body collapsed into the seat. His shoulders dropped, his head hit the headrest, and he let out a long sigh like someone finally taking off a heavy mask. I saw it in the rearview mirror. His face changed completely. The worry lines got deeper. His eyes were red, not from crying, but from that exhaustion of someone who has slept poorly for weeks. He spent a few seconds just breathing, looking at the ceiling of the car, as if he were trying to remember who he was before stepping into that theater. The interesting thing is that despite being a Hollywood star, he carried something I had seen in a lot of people who get into my cab, that feeling of being burned out from performing. You know when you spend the whole day being who people expect you to be, and when you are finally alone, your body just gives up on pretending. It was exactly that. He fiddled with his badge, read his own name printed there, and let out a short, awkward laugh, murmuring producer as if the word were an inside joke. He gave the address in a low, almost automatic tone, and I pulled away slowly, letting the city come in through the window. As we moved away from the theater, you could hear, even from inside the car, the buzz of people commenting on the movie they had just watched. Some loud laughs, generic praise, but also that type of mean comment disguised as constructive criticism, like it was funny, but he always does the same thing, right? Or it sells tickets, but it is not real cinema. Adam heard all of that through the cracked window, and his jaw went tight. He did not say anything, but the way he gripped the strap of the backpack on his lap showed that every one of those sentences had a specific target and landed heavy. It was there, in that initial silence, with the Manhattan lights starting to flash outside and the cold seeping in through the window crack, that I realized this night would not be just another ride. There was something in the air. A mix of contained frustration and a desire to let out what had been bottled up for too long. And as always happens in these moments, as soon as the city got some distance and the noise died down, he started to talk, not to me specifically, but to the safe void that a taxi offers when no one else is watching. The first few blocks were total silence, just the hum of the engine, distant horns, and the windshield wipers cutting the freezing air. Adam kept his face turned to the window, watching the buildings pass by as if he were looking for something on the illuminated facades. Manhattan at night has this effect. Millions of lights, people rushing, sirens, but at the same time a loneliness that only those who have walked these streets know. Suddenly, without me asking anything, he spoke. It was not a planned conversation. It was almost a thought escaping his mouth, saying, "This city? I started everything here, stand-up, small stages, drunks, microphones that hissed." He shifted in his seat like someone reorganizing old memories in his head, and said, "When I was young, I thought comedy was simple. Make the crowd laugh, and that is it. Mission accomplished." Adam let out a short, somewhat bitter laugh and said, "But it does not take long for you to discover that there are different types of laughter." He explained that in the early years, he heard from other comedians, producers, and industry folks that there was an invisible line separating those who made people laugh with intelligence and those who made people laugh by being a clown. And of course, he always fell into the second group. He said, "I made silly jokes, did funny voices, fell on the floor, made idiotic faces, and it worked. The crowd died laughing." But here comes the part that a lot of people do not understand about this kind of career, and it applies to any field. Public success does not always mean respect from your peers. Adam said that even filling comedy clubs, even getting called for shows, he heard backstage comments like, "Oh, he is funny, but he is not smart," or "It is mall humor, you know?" Nothing very refined. I have seen this happen in other fields too. The musician who sells millions but is called too commercial, the best-selling writer ignored by literary critics, the giant YouTuber that traditional journalists do not take seriously. It is as if there is a secret club of serious art, and whoever achieves popular success is automatically left out. As the taxi cut across 6th Avenue, he kept looking at an old theater, one of those classic stand-up spots, and pointed with his chin, saying that was one of the first places I went on stage. His voice took on a nostalgic tone as he said, "I went in thinking that if I made people laugh a lot, I would gain automatic respect. But what I learned was that there are people who prefer to see you fail trying to be serious than to see you triumph being silly." That sentence hung in the air for a few seconds. And it is true. There is a cultural elite that values a sophisticated attempt that fails more than a popular success that delivers exactly what it promises. He adjusted his hoodie, pulling the zipper up to his neck like he was protecting himself from the cold or from the memories. He admitted that in the beginning, he tried to change his style, tried to tell smarter jokes, use cultured references, slow down the rhythm, and you know what happened. The audience stopped laughing, and the smart people continued not taking him seriously. That was when he started to understand a pattern that would chase him his entire life, that no matter how much he adjusted, there would always be someone ready to say he was not enough of something. As the city continued passing outside and we approached another traffic light, he started to get into an even heavier phase of the story. The moment he got his dream job and discovered that even there, he would not be seen as an equal. When we turned onto 5th Avenue, Adam shifted in the seat and started talking about Saturday Night Live with a mix of affection and hurt. He said getting into SNL was like winning the comedy lottery. Every comedian dreams of that. And I remember the day I got the call, I thought I had arrived, that finally I would be seen as a real professional. The show was, and still is, one of the biggest springboards in American TV. Giant names passed through there like Eddie Murphy, Chris Rock, Tina Fey, Will Ferrell, and Adam Sandler too. But as he told it, being inside does not mean they see you the same way they see the others. He described the backstage vibe as competitive, fast, creative, but also hierarchical in a way nobody talks about openly. He explained there were the smart comedians who did political satire, sophisticated impressions, characters with layers, and then there was me, playing the idiot, singing silly little songs, falling out of chairs. Adam laughed while telling it, but it was a laugh with a bitter aftertaste. He said my sketches blew up. The audience loved it. People imitated them on the street. Opera Man, Canteen Boy, Lunch Lady Land, everything became a hit. But in the hallways, in the writers' meetings, he heard comments that cut deep, like funny but kind of dumb right, or he is lucky it works, or is it talent or just a goofy face? Here is a lesson that applies to any creative work and even corporate environments. Visible success does not always change how you are viewed internally. Adam said that even with numbers proving his segments generated ratings, there was a constant feeling of being tolerated, not celebrated. He summarized it saying, "I was like the funny cousin the family lets speak at the Christmas table, but nobody asks for their serious opinion afterward." If you work in a place where you deliver results, but feel you are never taken seriously in important decisions, you know exactly what he is talking about. While the taxi passed a subway station full of people rushing out, he spoke about a specific meeting he never forgot. He had pitched an idea for a new sketch, something simple, funny, kind of silly, and one of the cult writers on the show listened, chuckled a bit, and then said in front of everyone that "you are funny by accident, Sandler, like a dog walking backwards. We laugh, but it is not because you know what you are doing." The impact of that sentence was so huge that Adam stayed silent for a few seconds after telling it. He continued saying, "The worst part is that part of me started to believe it. I started to ask myself if I really knew what I was doing, or if I just got lucky to be born with a funny face." He looked at his own reflection in the taxi window, as if he were talking to the younger version of himself. He said, "It took me years to understand that was envy disguised as criticism, that technique is not just what looks difficult on the surface. Timing, rhythm, delivery, character construction, he dominated all of that, but because it worked easily, they thought it was an accident." As we approached another light, he took a deep breath and said, "When I left SNL and went to the movies, I thought finally it would be different, that box office would speak louder than backstage opinions." He paused and said, "But then came another hit. Maybe the heaviest of all, because public success, I discovered, can give you money, but it does not buy you respect from critics or the industry, and that was when things started to get really hard." While we were crossing Times Square, with all those giant screens showing movie trailers and ads blinking non-stop, Adam pointed to an old movie theater nearby, saying, "My first movie premiered in a place like that. Billy Madison, 1995. I thought it was going to be the start of everything." And it was, in a way. The movie was an absurd box office success. People packed the screenings, left repeating the lines, doing impressions, buying t-shirts. He said we opened in third place on opening weekend and stayed in theaters for months. But at the same time, something happened he did not expect. The specialized critics ripped the movie to shreds in a brutal way, as if they were personally offended by its existence. He remembered some of the headlines and reviews he read at the time: lazy humor, comedy for people without brains, childish and unfunny. A famous review said watching the movie was like being trapped in a room with a hyperactive child for 90 minutes. Adam laughed telling it, but you could see it still hurt. He said the audience was laughing until they felt sick, buying tickets, taking friends. But to the critics, I was the worst comedian that ever existed. And here comes a hard truth that applies to any creative field. You can please millions of people, generate absurd financial results, but if the cultural elite decides you are no good, that label sticks and weighs you down. He said after Billy Madison came Happy Gilmore, The Waterboy, Big Daddy, all enormous public hits, all massacred by critics. Adam said it was a pattern. My movie would launch, box office would explode, critics would trash it. And the most interesting and cruel part is that the more success he had, the more irritated the critics seemed, as if the fact that millions of people liked it was proof that it was garbage. He said, "I started seeing articles like, 'What is wrong with the American public?' just because my movies sold tickets," shaking his head, as if it were a crime to make comedy that everyone understands, that does not require a master's degree to find funny. Here is a practical lesson that goes way beyond cinema. When you do something popular, accessible, that truly works in the real world, there is a group that will disqualify you exactly for that. In the business world, it is the entrepreneur who sells a lot but is called a sellout marketer. In music, it is the artist who sells out stadiums but is called too commercial. If you are going through this now, the question Adam was starting to ask himself back then, and maybe you need to ask yourself too, is, are you going to continue chasing the validation of people who will never give it to you, or are you going to embrace the people who already chose you? As the taxi kept going and the city lights continued shining outside, Adam adjusted the backpack on his lap and said something that changed the tone of the conversation. He said, there came a time when I realized box office was not going to buy me respect. I could make 100 hit movies, and they would still call me lazy, childish, talentless. He looked at his own hands like someone holding something invisible, and that was when I made a decision that, at the time, I thought would solve the problem. I started my own production company. I thought, if no one wants to give me a serious role, I will produce my own projects, hire who I want, do it my way. He paused and said, but what I did not know is that this would open another door of rejection, because then they started saying I only had success because I controlled everything, because I cast my friends, because I had the system rigged in my favor, as if that invalidated anything I delivered. And that was exactly when the conversation started getting even heavier. The taxi turned left, entering a quieter street, and Adam continued speaking, now in a heavier tone. He said, when I created Happy Madison Productions, it was not to become a movie mogul. It was because I was tired of knocking on studio doors, asking to do something different, and always hearing the same thing. Adam, you are great at what you do. Stick to comedy. That is where you shine. He imitated the condescending, almost paternal tone that producers and directors used with him, translating to you are not good for anything else. Creating his own company seemed like the perfect solution. Controlling the projects, choosing the scripts, having creative freedom, but as he discovered, not even having your own studio frees you from the weight of other people's opinions. He said that even with the production company running, even generating profit year after year, he continued being rejected when he tried to do something outside the comfort zone they had drawn for him. Adam related that he would read dramatic scripts, have his agent call, set up a meeting, and the answer was always similar: we love you, but we cannot see you in this role. We need someone more, how can I say, versatile. He shook his head, saying versatile, as if decades of a career did not prove I know how to do more than make an idiot face. And here is a painful truth a lot of people face. When you get too good at one thing, people trap you there, and any attempt to leave is seen as stubbornness, not evolution. As the car stopped at a red light, he looked at a movie poster on the side of a building and said, there was one time I read a script about a father dealing with loss, grief, guilt, heavy stuff, profound, no jokes at all. He spoke with admiration about the script, like someone recalling something that touched them deeply. He said, I called the director personally, told him I wanted to do it, that I was ready. The director got awkward, beat around the bush, and in the end said, look, Adam, I respect you a lot, but the studio won't bankroll you in a drama. The audience will go in expecting to laugh and will leave frustrated. You can't carry a movie like this. The hurt in that sentence was palpable. He said it was as if I had not spent years studying acting, taking classes, watching the best in cinema, trying to understand the craft. Here is a practical lesson for anyone who feels trapped in a box. Sometimes it is no use waiting for permission from others. Adam said that after years of banging on that door and hearing no, he started accepting smaller roles in independent projects, without fanfare, without expectation of awards, just to prove, mostly to himself, that he could do it. He said I did some movies that almost no one watched, but gave me something box office never did, the certainty that I knew how to act for real. If you are trying to break out of a role they defined for you, start small, side projects, volunteer work, courses that expand your repertoire. The goal is not to impress those who already labeled you. It is to build internal evidence that you are more than that. While the city kept passing by outside, Adam adjusted his hoodie and said something that summarized this phase well. He said the worst of all wasn't even the rejection. It was the way it came packaged, always with a compliment in front. You are incredible, but we love you. However, nobody does comedy like you, so. He sighed and said, it is like they were saying, stay in your place, don't try to grow, you already found your box, stop wanting to leave it. And while the meter kept running and we approached another part of the city, he started entering an even more painful layer, The emotional price of being a public joke, a meme, being on a list of worst actors, getting ironic awards. Because it is one thing to be rejected in private. It is another very different thing to become a collective laughingstock. Adam stared at his phone for a few seconds like someone debating whether to open something or not, then put it in his pocket without unlocking the screen. He asked, "Do you have any idea how many memes exist of me?" without waiting for an answer. Thousands, millions maybe. Most of them roasting me. Photos of me in random situations, baggy clothes, tired face, becoming a joke in every corner of the internet. He let out an awkward laugh saying, "There is the Adam Sandler fit check where people make fun of my clothes. There are lists of worst movies in history where I appear like 5 times. There are worst actor awards where I have won more than once." His voice was calm, but the way he gripped the backpack strap showed that it weighed more than he let on. He said in the beginning of his career he even thought it was funny, thinking, at least they are talking about me, right? They talk trash, but they talk. But with time, that started to corrode him from the inside, comparing it to a leaky faucet. One drop does nothing but drop after drop. Every day, every year, the structure cracks. Adam described everyday situations where this appeared. Business meetings where someone made a joke about his bad movies before talking serious business. Interviews where the journalist started with, "So, you know, a lot of people do not like your work, right?" Even casual encounters on the street where strangers shouted references to his movies in a kind of mocking way. He said the intention might even be affectionate, but the message that sticks is you are a walking punchline. Here is something important that a lot of people who are not public figures do not realize. Being roasted en masse is not the same thing as being roasted by a close friend. When millions of people share memes ridiculing you, you start to internalize that. Adam spoke of moments where, even after a good day of work, he would open the internet and see trending topics with his name associated with worst actor alive, destroyer of comedy, should retire. And you read that once, twice, 10 times, 100 times, and you start asking yourself, do they have a point? He looked at me through the rearview mirror asking, do I really am just a well-paid clown? Did I fool everyone, including myself, thinking I had talent? While the taxi passed a newsstand still open, he pointed to an entertainment magazine in the window saying there is a whole industry built on bashing celebrities. And I became an easy target because I am not the type who responds, who fights, who sues. I always took it in stride. But as he explained, taking it in stride does not mean it does not hurt. He said there were times I avoided social media for weeks. Not because I was too sensitive, but because it is exhausting seeing people who never did anything in life disqualifying you based on, I do not know, personal taste. And here is a practical tip for anyone going through something similar, even on a smaller scale: limit your exposure to the poison. It is not weakness, it is mental hygiene. Block, mute, walk away. You do not need to read everything they say about you. He adjusted his posture like someone trying to shake the weight off his back, saying the worst of all is, I never knew if the success made up for the disrespect, speaking almost in a whisper. Like, I have money, I have a career, I can support my family comfortably, but there are days I wake up and think, was it worth it to become a synonym for bad movie to get this? The question hung in the air, heavy, and as we approached another avenue, he started to change the tone of the conversation. Because in the middle of all this rejection and public scorn, a few people did something different. They bet on him outside his comfort zone. And that was when he discovered that maybe the problem had never been him, but rather the narrow-mindedness of those looking at him. The mood inside the taxi changed when Adam started talking about some exceptions, those rare people who looked at him and saw something beyond the clown. He started saying there was a guy, and his voice already came out different, with more energy. Paul Thomas Anderson. Just saying the name, you could see it carried weight. He called me personally and said he wanted me in the cast of Punch Drunk Love, a drama, no silly jokes, no pants falling down, nothing I was known for. Adam shook his head, still kind of in disbelief, saying I thought it was a prank call. I thought, why would one of the most respected directors in Hollywood want me in a serious movie? But Paul Thomas Anderson not only wanted him, but insisted, and in that conversation, said something Adam had never heard before. You have something rare, and it is not just comic timing. He described the process of filming that project, admitting I was nervous the whole time, like sweating cold before every scene, because I knew everyone was watching, waiting for me to slip up, waiting for me to prove that really I was not good for anything beyond slapstick comedy. But Paul Thomas Anderson conducted everything with a patience and a confidence in him that Adam had never experienced before. He directed me as if I were a real actor, without condescension, without "let's see if you can do it." He simply believed. And the result was something that surprised everyone, including Adam. Positive reviews, praise for his acting, people saying he had revealed an unexplored side. But the truth is, that side was always there. Just nobody wanted to look for it. Years later came another similar opportunity, this time with the Safdie brothers in Uncut Gems. They called me and said, "We want you for an intense, dramatic role. No comic relief, a desperate guy, addicted to adrenaline, buried in debt and lies." Adam remembered that when he read the script, he was impressed with the density of the character, saying it was everything I always wanted to do, but nobody let me. And just like Paul Thomas Anderson, the Safdie brothers did not treat him like a risky experiment. They treated him like a capable actor. They spoke to me like they would speak to any great actor, discussed motivation, subtext, layers, and for the first time in a long time, I felt respected. Here is a practical lesson that applies in any field. Sometimes the problem is not that you lack capacity. It is being in the wrong environment with the wrong people. Adam spent years banging on big studio doors full of people who had already decided who he was, but it just took finding directors willing to look for real, without prejudice, for the talent to appear. If you feel underestimated at work, in your family, in your social group, ask yourself, do these people really know you, or do they just project what they want to see? Sometimes the solution is not to try harder in the same place, but to look for spaces where they see you as a whole. While the taxi kept going and the Manhattan lights started getting more spaced out, Adam spoke with gratitude about these directors, saying they did not do charity, they did not give me a role to give the poor guy a chance, they called me because they thought I fit what they wanted to tell. And then he made a reflection that changed everything for him, saying, "I spent years thinking I needed to change, that I needed to prove, that I needed to become another person. But these experiences showed me that the problem was never me, it was the gaze of who was evaluating." And as the conversation advanced and we approached another part of the city, he started making a powerful analogy about all of this. A comparison that perfectly summarized what he had lived up to that point. When we crossed Broadway, Adam pointed to a street musician playing the saxophone on the corner, and even with the traffic noise, you could hear the music leaking through the gaps in the car. He asked, "Do you see that guy? He is playing for hundreds of people who pass by there every day. Some throw a coin, many stop for 2 seconds, take a photo, laugh, film for Instagram, and walk away. But how many really stop to listen to the music?" He left the question in the air for a few seconds, saying, "For years I felt exactly like that, like a street musician in Times Square. Everyone passed by, threw money, laughed, used me as disposable entertainment, but nobody really stopped to listen to what I was trying to play." He explained the analogy with more depth, saying when you are a public clown, people think they know you. They think they understand everything about you in 3 seconds. You become scenery. You become part of the landscape. Adam said that for years he was treated exactly like that, as part of the industry's background show, saying I made box office, generated profit, employed people, built a solid career, but to a lot of people I was just the guy with the easy joke. Nobody sat down to talk about technique, about choices, about why that worked. It was like, oh, it is Sandler. He always does the same thing. Next. While the taxi went on, he developed the comparison, saying the street musician could be incredible, could have studied jazz, blues, classical music, could have conservatory technique, but if he is playing on the street, most people will judge him by the location, not the music. That sentence hit hard, because it is exactly what happens in various areas of life. They judge you by the context, not the content. If you work in a small company, they assume you are not as good as someone in a giant one. If you study at a less famous university, they assume you are less intelligent. If you have popular success, they assume you are shallow. And the worst part, Adam continued, is that you start to believe it. You start to think maybe the problem is you are not in the right place. Here is a powerful practical lesson. Stop waiting for validation from those who do not have a trained ear to hear you. Adam spent years trying to impress critics who were never going to change their opinion about him no matter what he did. He said, I realized too late that I was playing for the wrong audience. I was trying to please people who had already decided I was no good before even giving me a real chance. The solution, he started playing for those who really listened, the audience that bought tickets, the directors who bet on him, the set colleagues who respected his work. When you change the focus from who criticizes to who consumes, everything changes. You stop contorting yourself trying to fit into an impossible mold. While the saxophonist's music faded behind us, Adam closed the analogy saying that guy on the corner can keep playing for those who throw a coin and walk away, or he can look for a place where people really sit down, ask for silence, and listen. Both choices are valid, but if he wants respect, he needs to stop measuring his own value by the reaction of those who never stopped to listen for real. He took a deep breath, saying, and that was what I started to do. I stopped begging for attention from those who had already discarded me. I started playing for my own people. And curiously, that was when some unexpected doors started to open, but before that, there was a very dark moment where I almost stopped playing completely, almost accepted that maybe they were right about me. Adam stayed quiet for a few seconds, looking at nothing like someone revisiting a painful memory. He started saying in a lower voice, there was a night I came home after one more meeting where they told me in so many words that I should stop trying to be a serious actor and focus only on producing. He said the studio executive had even been kind in appearance, saying, Adam, you have an incredible talent for identifying projects, assembling a cast, making things happen. Why not focus on that? Leave the acting to those who, have the more suitable profile. Adam imitated the politically correct tone, but the message was clear. You are not good for this. Give up. That night he got home, took a shower, spent some time just pacing the living room, not knowing what to do with that accumulated feeling of defeat. He said, I sat on the couch, turned on the TV, and started flipping through channels, and then I saw one of my old movies was playing, Happy Gilmore. He smiled slightly, saying, I almost changed the channel because in my head that was proof of what everyone said. Silly movie, shallow humor, nothing of real value. But for some reason he left it on and started watching, alone in the dark living room, watching himself 20 years younger acting like a clown on screen. And then something unexpected happened. He started to laugh. He said it was not forced laughter. It was not nostalgia. It was genuine laughter. Adam described the scene, him there alone laughing at his own work, noticing details he had forgotten, moments of perfect timing, joke constructions that worked in an almost mathematical way. And I thought, damn, this is good. It is not Bergman. It is not Scorsese, but it is good at what it sets out to be. He continued watching, switched to the next movie in the cable queue, then another, and as he watched, he realized something he had lost sight of over years of criticism. Those movies had given real joy to millions of people. He remembered stories he had heard throughout his career, people who watched his movies in difficult moments, after losing a job, during cancer treatment, on nights of deep depression, and managed to laugh, forget the wait for a few hours, feel genuine relief. He said there was a guy who stopped me on the street once and said my dad died when I was 12. The last thing we did together was watch Billy Madison. He laughed so hard he cried. Every time I watch it again, I feel him close to me. Adam stopped speaking for a few seconds, visibly emotional, saying how was I going to throw that away just because a newspaper critic thinks slapstick comedy isn't art? While the taxi turned another corner, he adjusted his posture and said something that changed the direction of the conversation. He said that night alone in the living room, I made a decision. I was not going to retire. I was not going to become just a producer. I was not going to let the opinion of half a dozen cult people define the value of what I did. He looked at me through the rearview mirror saying, but I also was not going to stay begging for respect anymore. I was going to continue doing comedy my way without apologizing. And if a dramatic role came up with people who really wanted me, I would accept. but without giving up who I was just to fit into a mold. And it was exactly that decision, as he began to explain next, that became the greatest act of creative rebellion of his entire career, because he stopped trying to be what they expected and started doubling down on himself. After that night, watching his own movies, Adam said something changed in the way he faced his career. He said, "I stopped trying to please everyone. I stopped reading reviews. I stopped going on sites that make lists of worst actors. I stopped caring when someone spoke badly of my work at a Hollywood party." But it was not a bitter detachment. It was more of a conscious choice of where to put his energy. He decided, "I am going to continue doing comedy my way, with my friends, with the humor I like, and if a dramatic role comes along with a director who respects me, I accept, but without giving up who I am just to try to become someone else." He explained that this meant embracing the contradictions, saying, "I can make a silly comedy movie one year and a heavy drama the next. The two things can coexist. I do not need to kill one to validate the other." This goes against everything the industry and society in general usually say. We live in a world that loves to put people in well-defined little boxes. Either you are serious or you are funny. Either you are popular or you are cult. Either you are commercial or you are an artist. But real life does not work like that, Adam said. You can be a dedicated father and also like making silly jokes. You can be a competent professional and also like dressing in an old hoodie. You can be an award-winning dramatic actor and also star in a screwball comedy. They are layers, not contradictions. While the taxi went on, he gave practical examples of how he applied this. He said, "I continued making my comedy movies, Murder Mystery, Hubie Halloween, those Netflix projects that critics hate but the public watches by the millions." He spoke without shame, without that defensive tone of someone justifying themselves. And at the same time, when the Safdie brothers called me for Uncut Gems, I went all in. I gave my blood. I proved I could carry intense drama. The result was some of the best reviews of his career, but he did not use that as an excuse to abandon comedy. He said, "Because if I did that, I would be agreeing with the narrative that comedy is less important, and I do not believe that." Here is a super powerful practical lesson for anyone who feels divided between different versions of themselves. You do not need to choose just one. You can be the serious professional in the meeting and the funny one at happy hour. You can be the experimental artist and also do commercial work that pays the bills. You can be the intellectual who reads philosophy and also watches trashy reality TV. The pressure to be coherent all the time is a trap. Interesting people are people with layers, with contradictions, with diverse interests. If you are trying to fit into a unique version of yourself just to please other people's expectations, you are wasting a good part of who you are. While the city lights kept passing, Adam summarized everything in a simple sentence, saying, "I stopped apologizing for liking to do silly comedy, and I stopped begging for permission to do serious drama. I started doing both when and how I wanted." He smiled, saying, "And the funny thing is that the more I accepted that, the less I cared about the opinion of those who were never going to respect me anyway, because I had found peace with my own choices." And as the meter kept running and we approached one more avenue, he started getting into the final part of the reflection, the moment he realized the problem was never him being too much or too little, but rather the industry being afraid of whoever does not fit into just one box. As the meter kept ticking and we entered a quieter part of the city, Adam shifted in the seat and said something that summed up the whole conversation so far. He said, "Do you know what took me years to understand? The problem was never me. It was never me being too much of one thing or too little of another. The problem was that the industry is scared of anyone who does not fit into just one box." He explained that Hollywood, and this goes for almost any big system, works by categories: comedy actor, dramatic actor, blockbuster, art cinema, commercial, cult. They need to catalog you to know where to put you on the shelf. And when you do not fit right into any label, they get nervous. He gave examples of other artists who went through this, saying Robin Williams was a comedy genius, but when he did drama, everyone got kind of lost. Jim Carrey too, saying, "Wait, isn't he just the guy with the funny faces?" Adam shook his head, saying, "It is as if we cannot have depth and lightness at the same time, as if being funny automatically disqualified you from being taken seriously." And the most interesting thing is that when these guys proved they could do drama, the industry reacted with surprise as if it were an accident, not a natural evolution of someone who always had talent. They do not want to accept that a comedian is also an actor, that popular entertainment is also art, that box office success does not invalidate quality. While the car passed a bookstore still open, he made an observation that applies way beyond cinema, saying the system loves predictability, loves when you stay in your square, always do the same thing, do not surprise, do not defy expectation. Adam said the more he insisted on showing different layers, the more resistance he found because I was forcing people to revise the opinion they had already formed about me, and nobody likes to admit they were wrong on the first impression. If you have ever tried to change fields, style, or posture in life, and found resistance even delivering results, you know what he is talking about. Change scares those who cataloged you, and a lot of people prefer to keep you where they always saw you than to make the effort to see you anew. Adam said that at a certain point, he realized it was no use trying to convince anyone. He said I could do 10 award-winning dramas, and there would still be people saying I am a circus clown. So he stopped playing that game, saying continuing to be myself with all the contradictions became my greatest act of rebellion. It was not to prove it to the haters, it was refusing to shrink myself to fit the mold they prepared for me. He said this with impressive calm, like someone who finally made peace with his own journey. Do I do silly comedy? Yes. Do I do intense drama? Yes. Do I wear an old hoodie to a fancy event? Yes. Do I laugh at myself? Yes. And none of that makes me less professional, less talented, or less worthy of respect. As the taxi approached the final destination, Adam looked out the window with a lighter air, as if he had taken a weight off his back throughout that conversation. He said in the end, the biggest victory was not winning an award, was not positive criticism, was not industry respect, it was waking up in the morning and not feeling ashamed of who I am anymore. He took a deep breath, saying, and curiously, it was when I stopped trying to fit in that some unexpected doors started to open for real, because interesting people recognize interesting people, and those who are afraid of contradiction were never going to understand me anyway. And with the city starting to show his hotel in the distance, Adam started to make a powerful closing of all that, looking at New York one more time, the same city that saw him start, and reflecting on how much had changed, not the city, but the way he saw himself in it. The taxi stopped in front of his hotel, but neither of us moved. Adam stayed looking out the window at New York, the same city he had pointed out at the start of the conversation as the place where everything began. The lights continued shining, the buildings continued to be super tall, the streets continued full of people running from one side to the other. This city hasn't changed at all, he said almost in a whisper. It is still tough, still competitive, still full of people judging you on every corner. He paused, saying what changed was me. What changed is how much I care about what they think. The phrase came calm, without anger, without hurt. Just the realization of someone who finally found an internal balance point. He looked at the theater in the distance where he had left hours ago after the premiere, saying, I left that place today destroyed. I heard people laughing at the movie, but I also heard the mean comments, the little jokes, the poorly disguised contempt. Adam turned his face in my direction, saying, and do you know what I realized during this conversation? That I already knew all of that. I already knew they were going to talk trash. I already knew they were going to roast me. I already knew that no matter how hard I tried, there would always be a group that was not going to take me seriously. He smiled slightly, saying, but I did it anyway because now I do it for the right reason, because I like it, because I believe in it, because it brings joy to people who matter, not to try to convince those who already decided to hate me. While he spoke, I saw his face reflected in the taxi glass, superimposed on the city lights. He continued saying, if I had given up back then at the first, you will never be taken seriously. Comments, I would have lost much more than a career. I would have lost the chance to show other people that you do not need to choose between being funny and being profound, that you do not need to give up who you are to gain respect. Adam adjusted his backpack on his shoulder, preparing to leave, saying, because in the end, respect that comes from you contorting yourself to fit a mold is not respect. It is tolerance. And I am tired of being tolerated. He opened the door slowly, the night cold entering the car. Before getting out, he turned to me one last time, saying thanks for the conversation, and it seemed genuine. Sometimes we need to let it all out to remember why we keep going. Adam got out of the taxi, put the hood of his beat-up sweatshirt over his head, and stood on the sidewalk for a few seconds, looking at the hotel, then at the city, then at the overcast New York sky. He was no longer the destroyed guy who had entered the car. He was not the clown the media painted. He was simply a man who had made peace with his own story, with his own choices, with his own value, regardless of the thermometer of those who never understood what he did. As he walked toward the hotel's revolving door, I stayed there, engine running, watching him disappear into the movement of important people entering and leaving. And I thought about how many people get into my taxi every day carrying the same weight. The feeling of not being taken seriously, of being judged by the packaging and not the content, of having to choose between versions of themselves because the world does not accept contradiction. And as I shifted into first gear to follow the night, that certainty hung in the air that in some other corner of the city, someone was also deciding if they were going to continue apologizing for being who they are, or if they were finally going to embrace their own layers, even if that means never fitting right into any box. How many times have you left an important place feeling that despite visible success, you are still not taken seriously? As if you needed to prove every day that you are more than the label they stuck on you. Adam Sandler got out of that taxi with his beat-up hoodie and worn-out sneakers, but with his head held high, still facing sharp criticism, still burdened by the nickname of silly comedian, but now with the silent certainty that he does not need Hollywood's approval to know his own worth. In which area of your life have you also started to believe that you are not taken seriously just because the system insists on labeling you in a way that does not explain even half of who you are? Now look at your own emotional taxis, those intimate moments where you think about giving up, about becoming only what they expect, about stopping showing other layers and transform that space into a decision, not a surrender. What change are you going to make tomorrow? Are you going to continue asking for a seat at other people's tables, or are you going to start setting your own? Comment down below which part of Adam's journey touched you the most and what you are going to do differently after this story. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay close for more real behind-the-scenes stories that no one tells. The next conversation might be exactly the push you need to stop apologizing for being who you are.